So, hello, Tammy, take over. Thank you.
Hey, hi everybody. I'll give you all just I'm hoping everybody's here because they're either interested in motorcycling or doing the Continental Divide, the Great Divide as it's often called. So to start, I'm going to give a little background about myself just so that you can put yourself in my shoes as I'm going through this ride. I'm not the most skillful rider in the world, but I've been riding since I was 14 years old. So I have a lot of experience, but I'm not particularly skilled. I've never been on a track. I've never done MX riding, but I do a lot of off-road riding because of where I live. There's more off-road roads than there are on-road roads. So you just learn to, so I can do mud and mud puddles and sand and dirt and all that stuff, but I'm not a really skilled rider. So as I go through the trip and what we encountered on this trip, anybody at any level can do this on any motorcycle. You could walk it, you could do it on a bicycle. I did it on a 250 Super Sherpa, a Kawasaki Super Sherpa. We ran into people doing it on 1200 GSs. There is nothing about anything that I covered that could not be done on a 1200. For me, the 250 was absolutely ideal because we did take a lot of smaller trails that we really enjoyed going slow on. We really enjoyed nitpicking our way around all these little foot trails and things like that. So the 1200 could still do all of them, but you'd have to really push through them. You couldn't go slowly. You'd have to wow, to get the weight of the bike through them, unless you're, a lot more skilled than I am. So that's the basics. I've been riding a long time, and my long trips, my first long trip was in 2011. I went from St. John's, Newfoundland. If you look behind Sharon, if you can see Sharon, just above her head, you see Canada is in the pink. So St. John's is all the way over to the most easterly point of North America. And I went to Vancouver and back on a KLR in 30 days. And that was my first long trip. So my motorcycle looked like a pack mule. It had more stuff piled on it everywhere, and I thought I was traveling light. So then I did a bunch of other trips. I won't go into them all, but a friend of mine that I met in Newfoundland while she was on a motorcycle trip there said she wanted to do the Continental Divide. I believe it was 2014 or 2015. Then she had a death in the family, so we decided not to do it in 2015, and we rebooked for 2016. And it was basically, we're going to do the Continental Divide no matter what. So I'm self-employed, and I'm a digital nomad, so it doesn't really matter where I am at any one time, but I do, tend to need a bit of money. So if my contracts are low at the time, then I have to work generally. But I had promised to do this trip, so I did it anyway, and I did it all on credit. Just so you know, I used my credit card for this trip, so I tried to keep the costs as low as absolutely possible. And for everybody's enjoyment, I have a spreadsheet of everything I spent on that trip that I can show you. And you'll see a couple expenses in there that you don't really need to spend. It was one of those emergency things, but I'll get into that. So we did the research on the trip, and to do the Continental Divide, you're going through the mountains. So there's certain times of year where it's not passable, meaning several feet of snow or so much rain that you can't do half the roads. So Molly is from Maine. Molly Nelson, my riding buddy for this, Molly Nelson, is in Maine, and the two of us are used to cold weather riding. We both have heated gear. Actually, I didn't for this trip, but she had heated gear, and we figured September was going to be the ideal month for us to go because it's dry, and we didn't have to worry about getting bogged down and doing a whole lot of slippery mud along this trip. and we could handle a bit of cold. So we did get a lot of snow, but nothing accumulated. So we did not have to stop riding because of snow, but we did get snow. And we did get cold temperatures and woke up to, you know, a quarter inch of frost in the morning on several occasions. But we were quite toasty warm. There wasn't, you know, there was no terrible discomfort or anything. It was pretty good. The only time we were uncomfortable was heading for one pass in Yellowstone where it rained and then it snowed and then we had sleet. And then we just said, forget that, we're getting a hotel. So that was the only time that we really needed to, we would have, you know, gotten hypothermia or something if we hadn't gotten a hotel. So the September is a good time to do it if you don't mind a bit of cold. If you do it earlier, you might get more rain. But, and the best way to do it is from north to south because of the temperatures, right? So it's colder in the beginning of September in northern US, but it gets a lot warmer as you go south. Therefore, you know, you could try to keep your temperatures up a little bit. And we encountered just about everything along the way. So I'm going to show you a quick map. I did a Google map for everybody too. The Great Divide Ride. I was kind of zoomed in here. Zoom back out. Dun-dun-dun. There we are. Okay, so I'm going to switch over. I've got my map open. I'm going to share my screen. Is that all right with you, Sharon? I'm just going to. There we are. Can you guys see the map? Excellent.
Yep.
Yes. Yep.
Good. Okay. So I'm from over here. See if I can move my map. It's screen response is quite slow when you're on Zoom. So I was living here at the time, and Molly was living here. So I flew to Montreal, and Molly rode to Montreal. And then we flew her motorcycle to Vancouver. And then on Air Canada for $800 Canadian. And then she got the ferry and ended up riding from this part of British Columbia to meet me here in Nakusp. And I flew, so I helped her unload her bike and we stayed with friends there. And then I flew to Calgary and got a bus to Canmore where I picked up my motorcycle. I made a phone call and bought a motorcycle over the phone in Canmore for this trip. I'm just going to switch over to the photos here. So yeah, that's me leaving Newfoundland. And this is Molly arriving in Montreal. How clear is that for everybody? Is that good? Can't see.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so we met up in Montreal, and Charles, this is Vernon's place we stayed at. Do you remember Vernon? Friend of Rob's?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Vernon was with Rob when Rob was in his accident. This was not long after that. So we stayed with Vernon in Montreal while we waited to meet up. Molly rode in, we put her bike on the plane, and then we got off in Vancouver and trying to get our luggage and our gear from Vancouver to Air Canada Cargo to pick up her motorcycle. They didn't have an easy way to get there, and they wanted to charge $40 for a cab. And I mentioned that I was on credit for this whole trip, so I didn't want to spend $40, and Molly didn't either. So we walked. We took our little cart and we walked along the highway asking directions to get to Air Canada Cargo. so that we could pick up her bike. These are the guys in Air Canada Cargo. And there's her bike. They strap it down to a metal plate, and they take a forklift and they take your bike and drop it off outside, and you unwrap it, get it all ready. I had a friend of mine that I met in Belize, of all places, who lived in Vancouver, show up with a can of gas so that she could gas up. You can't put gas in your motorcycle. You can only have less than a quarter tank when you're putting your bike on a plane. Does anybody have questions about putting your bike on a plane? I know that's often a question that people have. Nope. All good? Okay. So we ended up staying at this place in Vancouver. And then Molly went off to Prince Rupert in BC to do her own little motorcycle trip. And I went off to buy my motorcycle. This is my lovely Kawasaki 250 Super Sherpa. And this is Michelle and Neville Stowe. Have any of you heard of the Stowaces and Neville Stowe? If you haven't, you will probably run into him at some point in the motorcycle community, right, Sharon?
Yes, it's definitely a must-stop location.
A must-stop location. So everybody in the motorcycle community who's been through Canmore, BC has stopped, and you can see on the walls, he's got boxes of things, and he was very instrumental in helping me make sure that this newly purchased motorcycle was ready for a long trip through the Great Divide. So Neville was very instrumental in helping out there. And it turns out I had cousins in British Columbia that I went to visit as well. I didn't know. Turns out they're first cousins. Then I went from Canmore, long way around to the Kootenay Lakes to get to Nakusp, BC, to go to a Horizons Unlimited meeting in Nakusp. So I wanted to stop and visit a friend in the Kootenay Lakes. So this is just the ferry to get to the Kootenay Lakes. And this is, yeah, this is why I wanted to go visit this friend in the Kootenay Lakes. He's got this amazing setup right on the lake. So then I arrived in Nakusp to the Horizons Unlimited meet. Neville was there doing a class on how to protect yourself from grizzly bears. And that's one of the main reasons I wanted to go, because in the mountains of the Great Divide, you will run into grizzly bears. I did not see one grizzly bear on the trip, but I saw enough grizzly bear poop to keep me frightened the whole time I was going through grizzly bear country. So Neville does a protecting yourself from bears thing. And there's just a few shots from the Nakusp Horizons Unlimited meeting. Liz Jansen there. Lisa. And there's Molly showed up to meet me in Nakusp. And she is on a TW 200. So we took a 200 and a 250 on the Great Divide. So the trip started, and I don't want this to end up going forever because, like I said, I have so many photos. So this is just in BC, in Canada, heading for back to Neville's place because Molly needed a new tire for her TW, and Neville was nice enough to order one for her. So we had to get back there, and we wanted to take a shortcut. And I want to show you that shortcut here. We didn't plan this. We just noticed on the map that instead of having to go all the way around here to get to where is he? To get to Neville's place. I don't see it on the map here for his place, but so instead of going all the way around, we saw on the map that you could cut through this pass. Now we did cut through this pass, and I have only a couple of photographs because it was a little treacherous in places. and it was pretty dusty and pretty high. And by the time we got to the other side of the pass, we were both feeling rather drunk, and we couldn't figure out why. We were literally falling down and walking funny, and so what the hell is going on? I mean, turns out that this is one of the highest passes in Canada. Not in Canada. Well, yeah, in Canada. It's one of the highest roads in Canada. So we had been out of oxygen, and we got a little lack of oxygen drunk on this trail. We ended up sleeping for about 12 hours at the end of it in Kimberley. So we went from, where are we? Kootenay Lakes to Nakosp. The Grey Creek Pass is what that is called. I don't know if anybody knows the Grey Creek Pass. And then from Kimberley, which is right here at the end, to Canmore. And then we went from Canmore to Pinchers Creek. So I'm just going, there's Canmore up here. So Canmore is close to Banff, and the trail starts about up here. We can zoom into it. You see that, the dotted gray line? Yeah, Kootenay Lakes, Canmore, Pincher Creek, and then Eureka, Montana. This is the actual divide trail here. And we took a couple different routes to get along there. So you can order maps to take the divide. And we ended up going off the trail quite a bit, but I've got both routes in there so that you can see. If you don't like beautiful scenery, don't do the trip. There's so much amazing scenery. I don't know how many times we just pulled over and gawked for 20 minutes because of this. I mean, just look at some of these places. So back to Neville's to get a tire. Neville's got to take something or leave something unless you're Ed March. We don't need another bloody Christmas tree. Do you guys know who Ed March is? Yeah. I lost my GoPro camera here. Molly's looking sad for me. It bounced off. I don't know how I did it, but I didn't quite click it in on the front of my bike, and my GoPro went dancing off the side of a cliff, and I couldn't recover it. It's rough, I know, driving in some of these roads. So this is just in Canada still. And then we cross the border into, these are hats, baseball hats. We cross the border into Eureka. And this guy greeted us. Notice he's got a pistol in his hand here. He greeted us with a pistol. And then he gave it to Molly to play with. This was our greeting in the US. And then he gave us a jar of honey for our trip. And then I got rid of the jar of honey because we were going through grizzly bear country and I was afraid of attracting bears. This is an in-city park. It's right in Eureka, right next to City Hall on a river. So it's one of the many places that we stayed that was highly convenient when you're going through town. We camped for most of the trip. You'll see most of the camping here. And there's a lot of roads like this through the Great Divide. A lot of it is like this. This spot here, you can see the guy playing guitar. We stopped, this place is called Olney, and we stopped to get gas and asked this guy if he knew of a campground nearby. And he goes, yeah, I just bought an old scout camp. So we got to stay in a scout camp that looked like this on a lake. This was our campground for the night for free. We had a lot of free lodging on this trip. A lot of free lodging. Beautiful free lodging. Yeah, and then stopping in lots of spots. We got rain, and everybody knows what this looks like. When you get rain, you have the big gear blowout to dry everything off, or you've got stuff hanging on mirrors and portraits and everything else, trying to dry things off. And this is actually a rather interesting part of the trip because there was also a lot of deer. We started counting the deer thinking we try to keep score of how many deer we pass, but we got into the thousands and decided to stop keeping track of the number of deer we saw. So it's really, really dangerous. This is the road on the left, and you can see Molly here. See how tiny she is on the road? And I zoomed into her over here, but these are long, 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 beautiful roads, but you might have 15 deer cross that road in front of you as you're going down. So you can't go with speed. You've got to take your time going down and be ready to stop at any time. The Great Divide is not a fast trip. We did about 100 miles a day and got to see beautiful, beautiful, beautiful places like this. Amazing scenery. Couple places we stopped. This was bear country again. So we ended up having our little naps and stopping on little bridges and things where we felt a little more comfortable. I don't know why a bridge would be more comfortable than in the middle of the woods, but we figured we were a little more protected from grizzly bears along the way. Just amazing scenery along the way. There's one of our lovely friends. I took lots of pictures of deer, but then I stopped because there was so many. Lots of scenery like this everywhere. There's a whole lot of cows in the United States. There's thousands and thousands of them. So we came through this area and we pulled over to wait for these bears to cross the road. There was a mom and 3 cubs. And while we were pulled over waiting for them to go by, we started chatting with somebody in a car, and they were asking what we were doing. And we said, well, we were looking for a place to rough camp. But after seeing the bears and the mama, we thought, you know, rough camping might not be the best thing. So this guy says, oh, don't worry about it. I have a cabin you can stay in. So he said, follow me. We went down the road. You see this 1925 cabin. This cabin was built in 1925. And we got to stay here for the night. Look at this place. Reminds me of the Friendly Giant for the Canadians. Yeah. And then the guy shows up the next day. So he gave us the key to his cabin. We spent the night. He shows up the next day to cook us breakfast. And he cooked us, he called them Ziploc omelets. He just threw his veggies and omelets into a plastic bag and threw them into a pot. And then he served us breakfast. And this place also had the nicest outhouse I have ever seen and probably will ever see. It was amazing. And it was called the Sheet House. The Sheet House. Yeah. And these are the maps we use. There's Continental Divide maps that have everything written in, and then directions for the fine little turns and things that you need to do. This is a bicyclist that passed us twice. He was riding from sunup to sundown every single day. And we would often stop and visit people that, you know, people we knew who we had to stop by and visit, or we'd stop and explore a side road, or, you know, we'd camp and sleep in a little bit, or, you know, whatever we wanted. But this guy passed us twice. He got ahead of us twice from this trip. some of the things you see along the way. This is a drill out of an old mine. This is a cow patty. There's a secret to cow patties that Molly taught me. When you're in the middle of the woods, and you're in the woods in the middle of nowhere for most of this journey, the safest way to relieve yourself is to lift a cow patty, do your duty, and then just drop the cow patty back on top of it again so that you don't attract bears. Lesson learned. So now everybody knows how to properly do number 2 in the wilderness. You find yourself a cow patty and you lift it up like a toilet lid and you look after yourself. Look at that. Oh, I want to go back. I had a horn on my motorcycle and Molly had a bell. So when we passed people, we had a little bicycle horn and a bell. It's really funny. Little frost that morning. Yeah, I'm a little bit off on some of these. This guy, retired veteran. Yeah, he's near this town. I've got the list here. Ghost town. Elk Park. It's near Butte, Montana. Look at this, hey? So then we get to Bannock Park, and there's a bit of a story to do. It was a bit frosty in Bannock. It's a ghost town. And I want to tell you a little story about it as soon as I get to here. So 2 things happened here. We were waiting for Michelle Lamphere to come. Has anybody heard of Michelle? Michelle Lamphere? She's a motorcyclist as well. And she was joining us for 2 weeks of this 30-day journey. And she's from South Dakota. So she literally rode from South Dakota, met us here at the Vigilante Campground in Bannock. And we had another friend, Craig, who was meeting up with us. He's in California, Sacramento. Craig was, make a long story short, Craig ran into a stag on his way to meet up with us, and he crushed his leg and ended up in hospital, and we had to leave him behind. We carried on with our trip. He never did make it to meet up with us. He was about 40 minutes away from meeting up with us from Sacramento. So Craig, good news is just last year, I got to ride with Craig again, and his leg is good enough to ride, but it took him 2 years to get up there. So Michelle was meeting us here, and Molly and I spent a night in the campground while we were waiting for Michelle to show up. And we got into the campground. There's Michelle there. We got into the campground and a bunch of guys on Harleys showed up at the campground. You know how they arrive one at a time and they're really loud and everybody shows up. And it turns out that these guys are Masons. And Bannock is the location of the first Masons Lodge in North America. So these guys come here to initiate new members into the Masons Lodge. The initiation ceremony is reenacting a robbery that occurred at this place in Bannock, in this town. So they had to, in order for this guy to get initiated into the Masonic Lodge with the rest of these guys, he had to rob somebody. So guess who he robbed? So Molly and I were privy to this whole thing. Somebody had come over to us early in the morning and explained the whole thing to us. You know, it was a little scary at first. We got a whole gang of bikers that are asking us if it's okay if they rob us. So they gave us money. They gave us American money and said, tonight, somebody's going to come over and they're going to rob you, but they don't know that you know. Okay. So this poor initiate to the Masons Lodge is a super nice, shy guy. And he's scared to death to come over to rob us, right? We know what's going on, but he doesn't know. He knows it's an initiation, so it can't possibly be real, but he's not sure. You know, he's quite confused about the whole thing. So he comes over and comes up behind me and he says, I really don't want to do this, but I'm here to rob you. So I said, oh my God, I don't know what to do. Here, take my money. And I gave him Canadian money instead of the American money that they gave us. Oh my God. Yeah, it's one of those you had to be there situations. We got robbed by a gang of Harley motorcyclists who are Masons, and it was just the craziest story. So of course we became friends with those guys after they robbed us. Yeah, there they are. Dubai's MMC chapter 36, Masons, Montana. So then we took the old Bannock Road, which looks like this, and this, and this. Oh, I have to be careful what I show in here. So Bannock, as you saw back here, there was frost in Bannock, but by the time we got down the road, down the old Bannock Road, it was hot. It was, you know, up to 30 degrees, which would be what, 80 degrees Fahrenheit? Is that about right? So
I think it was like 85, maybe a little more. And hi, Tammy.
Oh, hi.
It's Michelle.
That's Michelle right there. We can see your bun.
Oh, yay. Sorry about that.
Your bun, not your bum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, better.
There's me in underwear. There we go. Having a swim and a snack. Yeah. This must be a real flashback for you, Michelle.
It's a fun one. And thank you for sharing this.
Oh, I'm
Your
so happy.
photos are beautiful.
So we've got my Super Sherpa. We've got Michelle's Yamaha XT. Fuel injected. And we've got Molly's wonderful Ratty Pigeon. She calls it Ratty Pigeon, and it's the 200 Super Sherpa. Ian's Cafe. My son's name is Ian, so I had to take a picture of that sign. The scenery going through some of these passes is absolutely amazing, gorgeous. This was cold too, hey Michelle? I think just past this we ended up getting a bit of snow as well.
Yeah, it was really cold.
So I met Michelle in Newfoundland. Do you want to tell that story, Michelle, while I'm going through these?
Sure, I'll give the condensed version. In, gosh, what year was it? The summer of 2013. Yeah. On my boyfriend at the time and I were traveling on 2 motorcycles riding the Trans-Labrador Highway. And we were on a section coming out towards the coast, towards the end of the Trans-Labrador, and I had an off on my bike and broke my leg. And I was flown from Happy Valley Goose Bay to St. John's for surgery. And of course was out of it, didn't know what I was going to do with my bike, when I'd get back on the bike, etc. And a local riders group responded to kind of a cry for help online for people, you know, do you have suggestions of where I can stay, who could store the bike, la la la. And a rider from Newfoundland actually wrote and said, hey, I've got a friend Tammy who might be able to help you out. So Tammy responded, connected to us, and was a complete lifesaver. Took 2 strangers into her home. We wound up staying for 3 months with her, and she was the consummate host and friend. She was amazing. So it's one of those stories that I won't go into in depth, but for anybody to take a stranger into their house for 3 months, and as warm as she is and a big a heart as she has, we were instant friends. So I'm eternally grateful, and thank you for helping me get back on the bike, get some courage, overcoming what was really a difficult time. So we've been friends for years since.
Yes, absolutely. The other side of that story is that I had empty nest at the time. My daughter had just moved out. I had a spare room in a very empty home, so it was almost a desperate thing. Stay with me, stay with me.
I'm pretty sure I was the more desperate one in all of that, but yeah.
Well, I put her to work. She did gardening for me, and she cooked a lot, so very good, very good. And Molly, I met Molly in Newfoundland as well. Now, Molly was on this wonderful solo journey from Maine up into Newfoundland, and she left her keys in her bike to go get a tattoo. And somebody hopped on her bike, rolled it down a hill, and ran off with it. I'll make that story short. The same motorcycle group, it's called Ride the Rock. Newfoundland's a big rock, so they call it the Rock. So it's Ride the Rock is the Newfoundland group, and got wind of this story that this woman's motorcycle was stolen in St. John's, Newfoundland, which is just not heard of. You just don't do that in our community. So every biker group on the whole island, it takes 9 hours, by the way, to ride across this island. Every biker group, the Gold Wings, the Harleys, the adventure riders, the MX riders, the sport riders, stunt riders, everybody got together and locked the island down. And they had to return the motorcycle because they couldn't get rid of it. They returned the motorcycle. It had been stripped, but she got the bike back. And then everybody in town donated something that she was missing. So she got new bags from the Honda dealer. She got a local motorcycle mechanic, Dwayne Moss, made sure her motorcycle was in tip-top shape. We had an ice cream run with Ride the Rock and took donations to replace the money that was stolen. We got her new rain gear, the whole thing. She ended up staying with some friends as well while she was awaiting this. So that's how I met Molly. So there's Molly, Michelle, and myself on this trip, and we all met under weird circumstances in Newfoundland, Canada. So if you put all these stories together and the deep friendships that come out of that, it's really quite amazing to ride with these women that you have such an amazing connection with. So at the beginning of this trip, the most important thing that I find, and I've done quite a few trips now, is setting your intention of what the trip is about so that everybody on the trip is on the same page. Like our intention was to enjoy and revel in the wilderness as we went through the Continental Divide. It wasn't about speed. It wasn't about anything else. It was reveling in the now as we were going through this trip. So we didn't do anything that was going to, we didn't do anything high risk. And we didn't, actually, I don't think we had a drink the whole time. It wasn't about that. It was about really being in the now and enjoying the wilderness and enjoying the people that we met along the way. And that's super important at the beginning of any trip, is that everybody is on the same page about what it's about. Sometimes it's fun to do a trip that you just start and you get to your destination as quickly as you can, and then you turn around and come back as quickly as you can. Sometimes that's what a motorcycle trip is all about. This was not one of those. It's not like that. This was about really enjoying it and enjoying the landscape and the people. This is 7,120 feet, the Idaho-Montana border. Some more photos. This is where we got snow, isn't it, Michelle? I think we got snow just before this. We ended up staying at this motel.
Yeah, this is in West Yellowstone, and we planned to go into the park. It was a weird thing because West Yellowstone then had a fire, and the route that's actually the official Continental Divide trail was closed, and we had to divert around it. And we stayed in West Yellowstone, and then they got like a foot of snow.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy. So this is the time when it was cold. There had been snow and some rain, and it was really uncomfortable. So we just all agreed, let's get a hotel.
Yeah.
Someplace nice and warm. And Michelle works in the hospitality industry, so she was amazing at getting us some good rates. I went in thinking, how much is a room and do you have one? And she went in with a full negotiation on a better price. It was great.
We had to save money for a can of beans for dinner, so.
That's right, we did. I wasn't the only one doing the trip on the sly. At the very beginning, I was saying, Michelle, I did this whole thing on credit, so I was trying to spend as little as possible. Yeah, there we are at 7,000 feet again. Oh, Jackson. This is a lovely story too. Michelle, I think you're in here. No, you might not be in this group. So the Cowboy Bar, isn't this where your parents met, Michelle?
That they met in South Dakota, but that was where they went on their honeymoon.
Oh.
They went to the Cowboy Bar in Jackson, Wyoming.
Jackson Hole.
So, yes.
Yeah. And so Molly had a friend in Maine who knew this woman who owned a ranch called Mead Ranch near Jackson Hole. So we stopped by to say hello, and they invited us to stay at the ranch. And our motorcycles got their own stalls in the barn. So each motorcycle had its own, including manure, just for fun. Yeah, it was a gorgeous place. Dick Cheney stayed here. Where did I get Bill Cheney? I don't know. Dick Cheney has stayed here. That was our little residence while we were there. Yeah, it was gorgeous. We were so lucky to stay at some of the places we got to stay at. It's gorgeous. When we left here, the wildlife started really coming up. I have an awful lot of pictures of that ranch. I think I liked it. Yeah, this is the couple that graciously put us up after Jackson. Yeah, so here we are, our first buffalo, and then antelope. I don't know what I was calling them at the time. Gazelles. The Canadian was calling them gazelles. They're antelope. And then the buffalo. Do I have more photos of the buffalo incident? No. So there was a certain road that we were going down where this rather large herd of buffalo were going by, and they didn't like the motorcycles at all. So we had to hide behind other vehicles while waiting for these buffalo to go by. And I did get a few snaps along the way, but Michelle and Molly were a lot more concerned than I was because they're country girls and they know what buffalo can do. And I'm just a city girl, well, small town girl, but city girl. And I was just thinking how cool this is. Let's get more pictures. We have the gazelles. It was gorgeous. Really, really beautiful countryside. Yeah, private homes ahead, dead end, national forest access. So there's another national forest road. A lot of the roads were like this going on the Continental Divide. Again, the scenery is breathtaking. Totally amazing. 9,584 feet. Snowballs. Yeah, it's one of my favorite pictures. Michelle and Molly getting all set up before we continue down the road. Look at that, huh? Oh, Michelle, I want to go back.
Me too. Just say when, and you can fly out. I've got a bike here for you.
Cool. Okay, so the grizzly thing. The grizzly thing. So yeah, Sharon saying, me too, me too. Grizzly bear area, special rules apply. So I've been mentioning about the grizzly bears. I'm not sure how long you've been there, Michelle, but I've been mentioning about the grizzly bears, and there was lots of grizzly bear poop and lots of signs that they were around, and we were trying to be very careful. So we, you know, didn't attract any. We got followed by a lot of birds along the way. Gorgeous. Not a soul. This is Wyoming. We're going to hit the Wyoming Basin here soon. Tabletop Mountains. Yes, this lady, we pulled up, asked the proprietor of this lodge if we could camp on her property. And she turned around and said, tell you what, you can have a cabin. There's a cabin open. There's beds in it. Just pay what you can. We ran into that a couple times. I think it had to do with me, you know, with that look on my face like, oh, cabin. No, I can't afford that. So she said, oh, it's pay what you can, pay what you can. So we came a lot of around so many people who were offering assistance and stuff as we went around. I hope I have a good picture of that. Yeah. So this is the Wyoming Basin. And this was the highlight of the trip for me, and probably for Michelle and Molly as well. We came along this sheep herders, what do you call that?
Sheep wagon.
The sheep wagon. We come across a sheep wagon, and Molly says, I have to go say hi to that guy. There was a guy sitting on the front step of the sheep wagon washing his socks. And Molly had to go talk to this guy. So of course, Michelle and I said, yeah, let's do it. So we went over to talk to the guy. And this is the inside of his sheep wagon. And we got some food together, and we had lunch with this guy. This guy, what was his name?
Hernado.
Hernado. Is from Peru. And he makes his living herding sheep. He's got like 1,000 sheep that he herds in the Wyoming Basin. The details of, I forget, was it $750 a month or something like that to live here? They drop food off once a month to him, and otherwise he eats mutton. So we pulled together our resources and had a lovely meal with this guy. So this Peruvian shepherd in the Wyoming Basin is having lunch with a Newfoundlander, a South Dakotan, and a Mainer. We had curry that night. And then he pulls out an Italian saxophone and starts playing Vaya con Dios. You can see why that was the highlight. And Michelle translating the whole time because he doesn't speak much English, and he speaks Peruvian Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was amazing. So yeah, eating curry with a Peruvian in Wyoming, and then being serenaded with an Italian saxophone. Yeah. Yeah, this is where Michelle, oh, you got gasoline all over your tent.
Yeah, so I had to camp a long way away from the fire.
Yeah, yeah. For obvious. Yeah, there was spillage from your extra gas cans, which is always a risk when you carry gas. Yeah, so Michelle ended up going back to South Dakota at this stage. And then I took this photo just to give you an idea of some of the roads that you go through, which is where I was really glad to have a smaller bike. But, you know, a 1200 GS would have no problem with this at all. It was pretty steep downhill, but this, believe it or not, is a KOA. This is a KOA campground along the Great Divide. This is another lunch stop. We'd buy groceries and pre-cook a bunch of things for 2 or 3 days and have a lot of snacky foods. And often we'd stop and take our breaks wherever there was a beautiful view.
What month are we in right now?
September. Yeah, this is September. This was near a train. I remember it well. We stopped to clean chains, and we cleaned our chains often. Again, I don't have all the photos in here, but I'm just looking at this one, being reminded of the gang of people we met who were hunters, and they were all dressed up with brand spanking new hunting gear. And it turns out that they were taking an 18-year-old boy on his first hunting trip, and everybody got dressed up in their finest hunting gear to take him on his inaugural trip. And I didn't end up getting a picture, but this scene just reminded me of that, the cool things we saw. Yeah. You see the moose? There's 2 in the picture. I don't know if you can see the mouse on the screen, but there's a mouse a mouse on the right-hand side with the horns. And then if you go left on the other side of the 2 trees, there's another moose in there. Bit of rain. We didn't have a lot of rain for the whole trip, but there was a lot of rain. I mean, you can see forever, so there was rain everywhere. This was a typical scene just about every night. Molly on her BioLite stove. We were in a dry area, so we did our dinner in the middle of the road so that we wouldn't be on anything flammable. And we stayed here. There was a small village there and an abandoned property. It was well kept, so it was probably like a seasonal property or something, but we stayed in lots of places like this. We just pull up on somebody's yard or a field along the side of the road. And then there was these amazing open stretches of road that we don't get around here. Snacks, dried pineapple and chocolate. Look how dusty my hands are. The dust in some of these areas was crazy. Mountain roads. So this is the view looking. You can see that you're looking way down at these trees, but this is actually going straight up. So this is the side of a mountain going straight up. It's pretty crazy. Beautiful forest. Lots of, there's Molly up at the top here. What can I say, hey? This is in Arches National Park. And there was snow here as well. It was quite cold, and we pulled into a town thinking we would stay there, but it turns out the town was shut down for whatever reason. There was no gas, there was nothing, so we couldn't keep going. It was snowing, but we had to keep going because we had no place to stay. So we ended up finding a place to sleep that was absolutely amazing. So this store was closed. See, sorry, we're closed. The gas was closed. So we ended up finding this absolutely amazing camping spot. So you can see our bikes down here, and we're up collecting firewood at the top of this arch. So if you climb up this hill and in through that hole, So we're climbing up the hill to get to that hole. And on the other side of that hole are little picnic grounds that had these little piles of wood at them. So we took the wood and tossed it down and made a fire. Freezing. Slept there for the night. Great Divide mountain bike route. Rio Grande. Yeah, so there's the arch and there's our camp spot down here. Getting our routes together for the next day. One of our non-camping nights, we stayed in Conejos cabins, which is an old Airstream converted. It was beautiful. I don't know how this got out of order, but this is 2016, so it was during the federal election in the US. So we called it the Trump election. And we were watching the debates in New Mexico. So Molly and myself and our hostess and host put us up. This is a place that I had stayed earlier, a couple of years before. I had done another trip and stayed with them through ADV Rider Tent Space. Have you guys heard of ADV Rider Tent Space? So Tent Space is a map that you can go to where people have posted up, you can stay in my yard, you can set your tent up, or I've got a spare room, or I've got a garage, or I've got a truck, or whatever. So it's people just offering their services. And I had called Sam Lambie to stay at his place in New Mexico, in Taos, New Mexico. And he wasn't there, and he said, that's okay, there's the keys under the mat. So I showed up at his place, let myself in, and he said, there's beer in the fridge, but you're only allowed to have one. So I ended up staying there, cooking myself breakfast, got some lettuce out of his garden, and it was a really, really good time. So this is a couple of years later, and of course he invited Molly and I to come stay again. So we stayed to watch, and I also had to do a little bit of work too. I had a client need a couple days of work from me, so we ended up spending 2 nights there.
I met them in Belize last February. Really nice.
They're super nice people. They were telling me, yeah, it was like the 6 degrees of Tammy separation.
Yeah.
There, and Sam was there, and Lisa was there, who was a friend of my daughter's.
Yeah, tiny world.
It is such a small world. They are fantastic people, and I really enjoyed that. And I was hoping to see them in Belize, but life had other plans.
Next time.
Next time, exactly. So another swim, another lunch break, another amazing view. So it was swim, lunch break, camp, ride some more, ride some more. And as you can see, it's nothing you can't do on a bicycle. This is a woman collecting pine nuts. So this is where Tammy gets to learn where pine nuts come from. I had no idea that pine nuts came from pine cones. It just didn't occur to me that pine nuts came from pine cones. So I'm having a nap under a pine tree, and I pick up this pine cone, and these seeds fall out of it. And I'm looking at it going, hey, that looks like a pine nut. I wonder. I know, a little silly. So this woman was picking pine nuts. The tree cows, there's places in the US where it's rough wilderness, heavily packed with trees, and they teach a cow where the trails are, and that cow teaches all the other cows where the trails are, and they all go out into the woods during the day, and they all come back to get milked at night. It's pretty crazy. Yeah, another nap spot. I think that's the pine cone nap spot. So we just laid my jacket down, and you've got all your riding gear on, so quick. That looks really, really laden down, but you got to remember that's a 250. It's a tiny, tiny little bike. And those are pretty small. side bags. Some of the camping spots were absolutely amazing. This is all wilderness camping. These aren't what do you call it? There's no outhouses or anything like that. This is just the middle of nowhere, and you're having a camp spot. And if you look around some of these places, the road would be way up here. But if you look around enough, you'll find where somebody has set up a camp spot from the bicycles and stuff coming through. So there are every once in a while, you'll find a really cool spot like this one. It was a good one. The elk were screaming all night long. It was crazy. The elk bugles.
How busy was the trail? Oh, sorry.
We rarely saw anybody. We saw a couple bicycles, and I could count maybe 5 other sets of travelers coming through. Nobody solo on a bike, but we met up with one group of 3, one group of 2, and another group of 2 that just whizzed by so fast we never actually met them. Sharon, did you have a question?
Oh, I just, I didn't know if this Zoom cuts off after the hour slot.
I think you purchased, though, didn't you?
Oh, yes, but I mean, I set it up for 1 hour, so I don't know if it does or not. So I just want to,
Cool.
let you know that we're past 1 o'clock.
We're getting shut.
I'm fine with hanging out and listening, but if we get cut off, then I just want everybody to know it wasn't, the end of the world.
It's the end of the world as we know it. There was a path here that we skirted around. So part of the trail had a lot of really loose shale, and there had been a lot of rain. So Molly and I decided not to take that route. She has a bad leg, and if something happened to one of us, it wouldn't be good. So this is one of the roads we took to skirt around a tougher spot. Again,
is this New Mexico right now, or Utah?
We are, I would have to check the map. We are getting further down. We are, the New Mexico picture was out of sorts. Wyoming. We went through Colorado. Yeah, this would be New Mexico. We are in.
For GPS, so I saw you had paper maps. Did you folks have the GPS map from, what is it, Kevin GPS, or was there a different source?
We didn't use a GPS map.
Okay.
What we did, we started using a GPS, and then we ended up putting it away because it was always inaccurate. And we did much better with paper maps and just paying attention to where we were. So we did use a phone, or I had like a $20 Garmin, an ancient little old square Garmin, to get GPS access, and a phone with no data. So the phone took about 20 minutes to get a good lock, but we so rarely needed that, right? If you follow a map, and Molly is also a tracker. So she's an exceptionally good navigator, and she taught me navigation. Michelle and Molly both were Tammy teachers, trying to get me to be a navigator.
You did good.
I learned a lot. I thought I had no sense of direction, but really I just didn't pay attention.
Would you share your map source?
Yes. Now that I didn't get to look up, but the map, it's the Continental Divide mountain bike route.
Got it.
They sell,
And I think
the water.
I think I bought them through a website called Adventure Cycling, and they refer to bicycling as what it is.
Yeah.
But it's a set of maps that I think I bought through them. You can Google it and come up with it pretty easily.
Thank you.
There is a really good set of GPS files available as well that he was mentioning. One of the other guys was mentioning the GPS Kevin ones. And what was interesting about those, I went with a group same year. Actually, I started in Antelope Wells and went up as far as the top of Steamboat Springs with a whole group of about 40 riders from Texas, broken into different groups by riding ability. But what was neat about the GPS Kevin routes was they would have red, blue, and green or something routes, because for some of the harder sections where if you were on a big BMW GS or something, you might say, well, I don't want to do that one. I'll stick on some of them were actually even street bypasses.
Yeah.
And then you'd have ones down to single track routes that were kind of red. That was quite handy. And we found them quite accurate using even just phone apps for GPS, like the Scenic motorcycle app, some of those.
Nice. Very nice. Yeah, I don't know if it's our way of navigating or whatever, but we found it, and probably we both just like maps better, the paper maps better. But this is an example of one of the bypass roads that, because we bypassed one of those tracks that was full of shale, and we didn't want to risk injury for that. But yeah, the maps are quite good, and the GPS tracks can be good as well, but there are subtle changes to the route as properties change hands and things like that. So it is good to kind of keep up to date with it.
I mean, which was the hardest part during the trip? For example, I don't know, running out of gas, or maybe the Grizzly area, or something like that.
Well, there's tarantulas there. The most difficult part for Molly and I was there was about 100 miles of sand that we did. Neither of us were good sand riders, and we almost took an alternate route. But then we looked at each other and said, well, what a better opportunity to learn to ride sand is not going to come up. And it's not dangerous. Sand is, soft to land on. It's not like going through rocks or shale or mountains. It's, you might drop your bike, but we're on little 250s. So we figured it was a perfect opportunity, but that was definitely the most difficult because I didn't know how to ride sand until about 50 miles in. And then I became really good at riding. Much, much better at riding sand. The other scariest parts, do I have a picture in here? I probably do. When it comes up, I'll let you know. The scariest part definitely is rough, sharp gravel roads that go up mountains and do switchbacks, right? That aren't 2 lanes. They're a little bigger than 1 lane, but not quite 2 lanes. There's no signs or lines or anything like that. They're just rough, loose, sharp gravel. And you get trucks coming down them. And there was one point where I could hear the truck coming, but I had nowhere to go. So I rode my bike right up against the cliff side and leaned my body against the cliff so that the truck could get by without hitting me. That was the scariest part of the trip. And it was not fun at all. That moment was enough to go, holy crap, I can't believe I just lived through this. And they come through, they were going about, 50 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour easily on these switchbacks. And it was a truck carrying a horse trailer, so they know what they're doing. They ride these roads all the time, but they don't see a little bike when they're coming around a turn. So that was definitely. And on that same road, there wasn't much gas between point A and point B. So we took a risk doing it anyway. We just assumed we'd find gas somewhere along the way. There was no gas stations, but there's a lot of farms, and farms often have a gas can here and there. And these big trucks will often siphon off a bit of gas for you if you run out and that kind of thing. So we just took the risk. Every time we took a risk, it turned out okay. So we could have gone the opposite direction, right? We could have had a really bad time, but everything always worked out. So
great, amazing.
Yeah, I'm grateful for that. Yeah, here we are. There's my gas can because I had to fill up. on this road.
And they're
So-
very cheap on fuel, these bikes, which are very good because considering the kind of trails, you don't need much power. You can do it pretty easily with these bikes and they are cheap on fuel.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
my gas is all right here. $2.26, 265, 3, 4, 5. You can see where we're getting into more expensive gas areas. I sorted these by price. So this is to fill my tank. So the $15 in Canmore, of course, that was the most expensive, and $2 in, I don't know where that was, but it was the fifth. So it was just when we crossed the border into the US, then it got a lot cheaper. But the total for gas here was under $300 for the whole trip. It was actually 2 something for the whole trip.
Just
So
select
that-
all the numbers and it'll tell you the sum in the bottom actually.
Yeah,
A little trip, which is 5,000 kilometers.
yeah, 196.47. Now
Hmm.
that's not all the gas. There were a couple of times where we had to buy a big can of gas and we all chipped in or things like that. So that wasn't every penny spent on gas, but that's the bulk of it right there. So yeah, 196.47. So the total for the trip was $21.91 for the 30 days. That includes flights.
Was that corrected to US dollars or is that
This is corrected to Canadian dollars.
Canadian? Okay.
Corrected. Now I'm cheap, so you know, grocery stores and cans of beans and peanuts and fresh fruit and berries, and we ate a lot of local food. You know, whatever was cheap along the way. And I did have a few things I had to buy, like it was $100 at Walmart in October, so that would have been to get home.
Is that a tap for your spark plug?
Could very well be. Could very well be. I ended up leaving my bike in Florida. So I rode it to Florida, left my bike there and flew home. And then I went back to get it in the spring and rode it back up to Newfoundland from there. But yeah. So the most expensive accommodations we came across, and we also shared, so I may have paid for the Best Western in La Mesa, but I would have been reimbursed for that, right? From the other, it was me and Michelle and Molly. And for this one, it might have been 2 of us that stayed there. So I would have gotten cash back for that. But I would have spent that cash perhaps on some gas that doesn't show up here. So the total is accurate, but where the money went is a little bit off depending on when we shared gas or we shared accommodations or shared groceries and that type of thing.
Tammy, thank you very much. I'm going to sign off now. This is Dennis Haggerty.
Thank you, Dennis.
It's been really excellent, and hope to run into some of you folks on the trail someday.
Oh, me too. We're all
Join us
hoping.
next Saturday.
Where do you live?
Southern California, Los Angeles area.
You said that already. Well, I've been in Los Angeles like 5 times in the past while. If I'd have known.
We actually have a lot of room for camping here. We're off in the Santa Monica Mountains, my wife and I. And so yes, we actually have lots of places to pitch tents on our property. But it's still early in the morning on Saturday, and I've got a few other things to do today. But you all take care and stay healthy.
Great to
You
meet you
too.
so much.
Bye-bye. Tammy, I'm going to sign off too.
What?
I live in.
My flower. You can't leave. No, that's enough.
Have to. I don't want to. This has been great. Your photography is wonderful, and your personal story and Michelle's is fabulous. I've been to Newfoundland a number of times. I did the Trans-Lab and I did the Trans-America Trail for 4,000 miles. I've used GPS Kevin. I think Adam was mentioning that, and I regret that I'm getting older, but I'm still 28 in my once I get my butt in the saddle. But thank you so much. It was a great Zoom.
My pleasure, Ken. My pleasure.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Tammy, if you don't mind, those pictures, could you share that on the Zoom group thing, the
I sure
event?
can. Yeah, yeah,
That'd be awesome.
yeah. I took out anything that might be personal.
Yeah.
This is the beginning of the sand, the 100 miles of sand. This was the beginning of it, where we decided we were either going to turn around or go through, and we decided to learn, and it was great.
What
Yeah,
was it?
got a little dirty, you know. This was a common end of day look. This is the Mexican border, where we decided to cross into Mexico, just to say we did. So we crossed the border, went into Mexico, drove for 20 minutes, turned around and drove back. Just to say that we were in there. This is a little town near Antelope Wells, and there's a gas issue there for our little bikes as well. So we went to the town and we just stopped at the first yard we found and talked to a lady who was in her backyard. And we said, we're here on motorcycles. We can't make it to Antelope Wells on our gas. Do you know where the nearest gas station is? So we were going to have to backtrack to find gas, of course, and then you use part of your gas coming back here to get to Antelope Wells. So what they did is they gave us the keys to the rec center, and they sent one of the guys off to go fill up some gas cans for us and bring it back, so we didn't have to go back. So we spent the night. Our bikes are in here in the inside the rec center. I've got a video of me riding my bike around inside there. And we set our tents up and had a wonderful and a hot shower the next day. And then we headed off. This was after that road with the trucks.
Ah,
This
that's
was
why.
that mountain switchback gravel narrow thing where we were nearly killed. So that's the Mexico border again. Super happy to. Yeah, I just realized that this is my camera, so there's not a lot of pictures of me. This is the border crossing guard that took the picture for us. But coming back into the US, they had their guns drawn. They were really not happy that we went into Mexico and came right back again. It was like we were in big trouble. So I don't recommend doing that. Going into Mexico was great. Coming back, they were like, okay, what were you doing? Well, we just wanted to say, what? No, what were you doing? They thought we were doing an exchange of, I don't know, drugs or information, or we were with the CIA. I don't know what they thought, but we got in trouble. Another camping spot. So I don't know why the names are escaping me right now. That same road where we were kissing the ground afterwards and we were worried about running out of gas, these guys showed up. They're on Yamahas. The RW, what is it? The Yamaha
WR250?
WR250s. Yeah, really nice WR250s. And they had just filled up with gas. So each of them gave each of us some gas to get to the next gas station, because we were out by the end of the road. We were sitting there waiting for a car to come by so we could beg for gas. And then these two showed up. His name and her name, I've got them on Facebook. I don't know why it's.
Is that Greg Hilchey?
It is Greg Hilchey.
Like,
Yes. Yeah, Greg Hilchey. Yeah, and this is we got mud in one spot the whole time. So our intention was to avoid mud, and we 100% did. So we had this one spot where it was a bit muddy. This is inside Mexico. And that's me heading back to Florida. So I went this way and Molly went the other way because she was going to do some more exploring before she went back to Maine. She was getting a trailer back to Maine. And then
So was that Texas or whereabout was that?
This was on the border. I can show you. You guys can't see this title in my way, but it's in the way. So Antelope Wells is Yeah, Antelope Wells is here. And we came back up to Hachita. Hachita is where we stayed in the rec center. So we came back up to Hachita. I went this way and Molly went that way. We just split up. So I ended up going through Texas, and I don't think I have. Yeah, we hit a fork in the road.
Nothing to take a picture of from there till for a long way east.
No, and my poor Sherpa, I had it pinned the whole time.
That's a terrible ride from El Paso till you get to about San Antonio or somewhere. It's pretty long, straight, and hot in most of the year.
Yeah, it was.
I'm curious, how was your bike at elevation? You ever have any power issues at kind of above 10,000 feet?
Yes. To put it shortly, yes. I was going about 30 kilometers an hour in a lot of places because it just couldn't get enough air.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's why I'm curious, because that's where I noticed suddenly the big difference between my bike and the fuel injected bikes. I was on doing the ride with some larger bikes, everything from 800s to 1290s.
Yeah.
And I had a 950 a KTM 950 Adventure. The last year it was carbureted, and it was fine up till 10,000 feet. And I'd been at elevations of that before, but there were a couple passes in Colorado, Hoosiers Pass, and a few of those where you could start to get up around 14,000 feet, where all of a sudden the power was just gone. And even on the highway, the 18-wheelers would be passing me. It was quite an amazing thing. You could see the difference immediately, and the fuel-injected bikes, of course, would just remap, and they had no problems. But I really noticed it at the higher elevations.
Yeah, Michelle was fuel injected, but the TW did better than the Super Sherpa did for whatever reason. Maybe it was
jetted.
Jetted.
Mm-hmm.
I know Michelle could keep her speed up for a lot of it.
Well, as much as a 250 can.
Yeah. So when
I
you're going,
experienced the same thing in Guatemala, like going over the mountain passes at around 12 or 13,000.
Yeah.
The little XT250 was just kind of burping. It was the older carbureted version, and you could tell it was running out of power. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, jetting obviously depends on where you're jetted as well. But I found that usually up to 10,000 was no problem. But then all of a sudden you just hit a wall. It was just a bit stark difference.
yeah. And
Yeah.
it's not a big deal if there was a couple places where that feels dangerous because there's no place to pull over to let a car by. But I found that they were so few and far between. I wouldn't, the bike I have now, I would love to do this trail with. I've got the F650 GS Dakar, and I would so love, because it's still lightweight.
Yeah.
The balance is good. The gas tank's under the seat, so the weight is lower.
So I mean, just about that, for anybody's interested about different bikes, as I said, I went with when I did the trail, I went with a group. It was a riding group out of Texas called Two Wheel Texans, and there was everything from some guys on dirt bikes, just full on 450s and that, up to 1290s and things like that. And we broke into groups by skill level and bike size. And so my friend and I, he was on a 1290 Adventure, we were both pretty aggressive dirt riders, but on big bikes. We said, well, we'll go with the fastest big bike group we've got. And it turned out we ended up with a bunch of guys from Austin who were brand new to off-road, had gone and bought all the, $2,000 climb jackets and had Triumph Tiger 800s and brand new BMW GSs, but they hadn't ridden off-road. And we had the hardest riding we had was on the first day, which for us is that we were going up. Well, for us, it was our second day, but they were starting in Silver City, New Mexico, which is about 150 miles up from Antelope Wells. And my friend and I thought, well, they're cheating. So we went a day early right down to Antelope Wells, and we were going to do the whole thing. We met up with the groups. We split into the groups. And on the first day, outside of Silver City, which is, I think, another important thing to mention, the times of year you can only do this kind of like late June till September. You were probably pushing the end of the season, I guess.
We were, yeah. We could have run into deep snow, yeah.
But there's a, and I forget which end of it is, if it's on the September side or on the June side, but there's one also where it can be really wet. And I've seen pictures of it outside of Silver City where people have taken 2 days to go through something, which we did in a half a day. When in mud, you can just sink right down in. So anyway, we were lucky. We went through that at the right time. But on the first day outside of Silver City, there is one area, and then when you were mentioning about the shale, it reminds me of that. It was very steep shale hill climbs and everything, and that ended up being hours for us because of it was hard for me even, but for the less experienced guys we were with, we were having to get off and help them push their bikes up, and it was a very difficult section, which we could have easily bypassed with the GPS Kevin routes, but these guys all said they could do it. And that ended up eating up so much time and all our water. It was amazing. All the cyclists, as you mentioned, they'd pass us twice a day. They'd end up where we were going, even though we were going at very high speeds and rarely stopping for long. These guys just truck it along all day. And I really had an appreciation for how they managed their water, because we were running out of water when we were having to do some of these things. And it was very difficult to get gas in that one section. And that ended up being a disaster, because we got to a gas station that was way off track, and he closed the shop right in the middle of us fueling our bikes. He said, "Oh, it's 5 o'clock. I'm done." And he wouldn't. We had 20 bikes coming right now. Can you just hold on 10 more minutes? And he wouldn't allow us to. And we couldn't get anything to camp with.
Word.
Finally, some local came by, felt bad for us. This was somewhere between Silver City and Pie Town, and told us, "Well, there's a church around the corner. You can go in there and fill up your water jugs." And they had there was a kind of old, homey, small town kind of church, and we all went in the back and filled up with water, and we were having to camp that night, which not everybody was prepared for it and didn't have all of the gear. And we were running back and forth, bikes were running out of fuel in the middle of the road, and we were having to do fuel trips for them. Was that one section that was really bad, but all because we got so much off because of that one really difficult shale hill climb area there. So
that was something I wanted to mention. I carried a water filter and I used it a lot.
Yeah.
A lot. So I'd take a dry bag and go to a creek or a river and fill it up and put that right into my side bag, which was waterproof as well. And then I'd bring that back to the campsite, and then I'd scoop out my bottle full of water and add my Sawyer filter and then squeeze that out so that we'd have good water. But
yeah. Otherwise, I don't think you generally need it, because every day you are passing through. As you know, there's always a town you pass through every day. But I think it's having the capacity. And would I do it again now? I have one of those MSR 6-liter dromedaries, and I would have brought one of those, and I would always carry a lot of water just in case for when these things happen. But
I don't like buying the bottled water, right? I don't like plastic. I try to avoid it as much as possible, so, and I carry my spork. We tried to be as environmentally friendly as possible as we went through these towns and places. So just an added, so the filter comes in handy. So I just posted the photos, a link to the photos on the invitation on Sharon's page. So I put it right there. So if anybody wants access to those. And again, they're just the highlights. There's literally thousands of
Tammy, if you go into the event and post it in the discussion, I think everybody will be able to see it. Right now, only Sharon's direct friends would be able to see that, I think.
Okay, let's see if I can find the event. Yes. Discussion. There, I'll put it right here. And if I can edit the event, no, I can't. So yeah, it's in the discussion on the event.
Yeah, just hit the post, I think.
Okay. Right.
Awesome.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Michelle wrote a story. What magazine did the Wyoming Basin story go in, Michelle?
Oh, Overland Magazine. It's a UK-based adventure moto magazine. So it's, you can still get print copies, but Overland Magazine.
Yeah, Overland Magazine. And Michelle did a beautiful write-up of the the Peruvian shepherd story.
The Peruvian saxophone player.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. That memory will never leave me for sure. And most of and if you like camping and you really enjoy wilderness camping, then this is epic. You don't have to stay in a hotel at all if you don't want to. Well, we've probably kept everybody for quite a while now.
Because we all have so many other places to go today.
Yeah, I know.
No, that was
Well,
really, really good. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Yes, I want to say your photos are amazing. I
Fantastic.
They
yeah.
are.
definitely
glad-
want to
glad
put that
you
on my
Beautiful.
list of things.
It's easier to remember when you've got photos, but I have to say that there were some places that I wish I had photos that I don't, but
Yeah.
at the time, I'm really glad I didn't take out my camera, because sometimes you're just in the moment and it's more important than recording it. So there are some, several parts of that trip that are in here, but never got recorded. But
What happens on the trail stays on the trail.
you got it. Really, beautiful experiences. So yeah.
Yeah.
And there's probably another 100 stories that I could tell about the trip, but those are the highlight ones. There's just so much, right?
Was
Does
amazing,
anybody-
really.
Questions? Do you want to take a look at that budget again? Or it's not really a budget, it's just my spending list. Mark's Work Warehouse and Motorsports. The Motorsports was buying bolts and screws that got rattled out. I just ended up spending, 20, it would have been like 20 American on a jar of Kawasaki bolts, because I kept turning around and there was bolts missing everywhere on my bike from rattling them off.
Any flat tire during the trip?
No.
Wow.
Isn't
Great.
that amazing?
Yeah, it is. With a
You know,
fully
I-
loaded bike on the trail, yeah.
Probably
It
kept
is.
high pressure. You were running what, 25, 28 PSI or?
Easily, yeah. We
Yeah.
kept pretty high pressure, and I'm trying to think. I wore tires out. I needed new ones. But
A little bit of more suffering with a little bit more pressure, like to your spine, but less pinch flats.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. No pinch flats at all. I had on one trip I did. I had a pinch flat at the beginning. Got as far as New York from Newfoundland, and I got a pinch flat there from a poorly installed tube.
Mhm.
And I had another flat no, that was the same one. That's it. I've only had one flat
Don't jinx yourself.
on an away trip. I had, in Newfoundland, I had one summer I had 5 flats, but they were all within, close to home. I was lucky with that. I did a chart of the expenses, so accommodations and food, of course, equipment, so stuff I had to buy along the way, tools and repair.
Insurance, just typical travel insurance, or was it extra like wilderness insurance or anything?
Just typical travel insurance that I got for the bike that covered me in the US, since I wasn't really leaving the US. Between Canada and the US, I used my regular TD insurance. I just beefed it up for the US portion of the trip. So yeah, and 2%. I went to the liquor store once. It was about $45.
I think my chart would look a little bit different.
That's when you run out of fuel.
That's it. That's what it was. I didn't drink. I put it in my butt. It was $43
Gasline antifreeze.
on the 31st of September. So that was at the end. I bet I bought myself a bottle of wine for the end. I
August.
don't remember, but that would be an expensive bottle of wine.
August.
Oh, sorry.
Beginning.
That was August. Oh, that was at Neville's. That was the Stoasis. That's what that was. Yeah, there's a little bit of alcohol consumed at the Stoasis.
That sounds about right. Garage-aritas are expensive.
That's exactly what that was. I bet you I bought the bottle of tequila for the Garage-aritas.
Yep.
Yeah. But
But just
you're
from
having so much fun and you're exhausted by the end of the day.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, just for a different perspective, you can easily stay in hotels the whole trip as well if you want to. On the trip I went on, we planned for both, and in such we booked hotel rooms for every night, and then looked at what the cancellation policies were, and we thought, if we hit really bad weather or something, we'd always have an out.
Right.
But as it turned out, when we started looking at it, a lot of them were like you had to cancel a week in advance or not. So then we'd end up taking the hotel because we had paid for it. That was probably my biggest regret. I wished I had camped more on this trip. But that being said, there is something to be said for being able to just roll in at the end of a hard day ride and have a hot shower and a cold beer, as opposed to having to pull out a tent and set all that up. And the packing up in the morning was
Right.
was always a lot easier. But I think you can do this either way. But personally, I wished I had camped more.
Yeah, our protocol was to be off the road by 3 p.m.
Oh wow. Yeah.
But in mid-September, you were running, or mid to late September, you were running out of daylight too, especially in the mountains.
Yeah.
Right.
So by 3 p.m. and then you're not overtired. You've had a long day, but you're not overtired, and you get to enjoy the evening, setting up your tent and finding a good spot, going for a swim, collecting some water, cooking some food.
That's really good advice, because the times we did have trouble, we were found trying to ride, and some people said that they were going to ride in the dark, and they had accidents because of it, and it's quite difficult. But that's another interesting point. We did it in July, trying to avoid the wet weather. I think it's September when you get the chance of the wet weather. But anyway, so maybe not. But what we found was really hot in New Mexico and some of those places, but then you'd have then you'd find somewhere to camp, and you'd be way up on top of a mesa, and you'd be freezing at night. But when we got into Colorado, actually a lot of the passes were still closed due to snow. They'd had a really late clearing of the snow that year, so we had some spots where they said impassable. We ended up having to go through because we had someone get injured and we had to go for help. But there were places where there was 5 feet of snow still in the trails when we did the trip.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was interesting. And when I had to bug out in Steamboat Springs, well, that's where it ended, and I had to drive 2 days back to Houston, and it was 110 degrees the whole way back through there. So it was pretty bad coming back, but it was perfect otherwise. Other than the few closed passes, I think that was really perfect weather for going through there, if a bit warm at times.
Yeah. I don't mind the warmth, so I might do it at a different time of year next time just to try it out.
Yeah.
Depending on where we're allowed to ride, right?
Yeah.
Where in
Interesting.
the world you might be then too.
Yeah.
There are always some place in the world. So,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to wrap this up for us. And if anybody else has any questions or anything, and we're going to start doing this every Saturday, especially while we're on lockdown, from 12 to 1 Eastern Standard Time. So Tammy, thank you very much for sharing your time and your photos and your trip.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate everybody that showed up today.
Thanks for hosting it, Sharon and Tammy. It was fantastic. Good to see it all, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Really.
for coming, everybody. I'm going to take a quick poll. Is anybody interested in a Cambodia ride story?
Cambodia is cool.
Yeah.
Yes,
Definitely.
I'd like to hear about that.
Yep.
Yes.
I've done Thailand.
Oh, nice. Nice. Well, that'd be a good comparison between, I was on the border of Thailand and Cambodia.
Yeah,
we
went
to
up
do something for Guatemala, Sharon, if ever you want later on.
Okay, yes, I'm always looking for new people. Let's hope that our lockdown doesn't last for the rest of the year. But so, and Michelle too, I'm going to get you.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah,
Cool.
so I want to see more about South America. I'm thinking in 2 years, I'm going to spend 1 year in South America.
Me too.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Well, I'm here to help. You know that if I can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to stop my share here. And any questions at all, you've got me on Facebook. Just ask away. I'm more than happy to share.
And I'll send you a picture of a fork in the road.
Okay.
A real fork.
Excellent. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Yes, that was great.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Very
you.
much.
Bye-bye all.
Thank you. Bye.